And we're rolling. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our new show. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have such a great show for you guys. Isn't that right, Fabian?
We have an incredible show because we had an incredible night last night with a lot of things going on, and we're going to go over all that and more.
Absolutely, we will. So hang back and have a good time because we're going to discuss Trump and Elon Musk at the end of this show. We're going to deliver you guys all the highlights and lowlights if there's actually any lowlights. I don't think there's any. But first, we got to discuss some battleground state polls. We're going to discuss those here in a second. And we're also going to do a little cool segment here where we're going to compare Tim Walz, one VP candidate, against JD Vance, another VP candidate. And we have a lot of great stuff for you guys surrounding that. And we also have a Marxist expert with us, Fabian, so he can tell you guys about how Tim Walz is indulged in Marxism and how he just loves China, how he takes people there. But anyways, we're going to get to the actual policy of that. And then we will obviously go to the end of it to tell you guys the highlights from last night's amazing record-breaking interview. So Fabian, should we just swing right into it?
Let's do it.
Polls?
People are ready.
So we have a New York Times poll here for three various swing states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So this is the New York Times poll, CNN polls. This is actually a very accurate pollster. So these are alarming numbers, and you may not like this entire segment about battleground polls, and that's good because I hope that you understand that you have to do everything you can to try and get people out there to vote for Trump because these are alarming numbers and there could be reasons behind it. But if 2024 presidential election were held today, who would you vote for, Kamala or Trump? Kamala is leading Trump in Michigan by 4 points, in Pennsylvania by the same 4 points, and in Wisconsin by the same 4 points. But what I actually want to look at here is another poll, the same poll, but the traits, meaning what traits do people think the candidates have and what they favor. So percentage of registered voters who said these traits describe each candidate very well or somewhat. And Fabian, take a look at these. So has a clear vision for the country. Trump is leading Kamala there 60 to 53. Has the temperament to be an effective president, 45 to 54. Kamala is leading him there. Is honest. Kamala is leading him by 52 to 41. Is intelligent. Kamala is leading him there 65 to 56. But this, I think, is the most interesting poll there is, or the trait one. Will bring about the right kind of change. Kamala is leading 50 to 47. Fabian, why do you think registered voters believe that Kamala has an ability or is the one to have a ability to change things in the right way?
Unfortunately, I think most voters are low information voters and maybe are just starting to tune into the election now. The people I've interviewed on the street back in Hollywood last month really had no clue about what was really happening. And it's kind of astounding to know that there are still people in this country that don't really tune in to what's happening to their country. It's scary and it's sad. So I think that these polls reflect just the beginnings of what is going to be a very long, 3-month race or so. This question here has a clear vision for the country. The fact that, and of course, Trump's beating her 53 to 60%, but the fact that she hasn't released any policy yet, any policy, her administration said, or her campaign said they're going to release it next week, tells me that if someone is conducting a poll and is answering a poll saying that 53% said that she has a clear vision of the country, she actually has no vision yet. And that tells me that these people have no idea what they're actually talking about. Maybe they saw a few clips online and they believe she may be good, but at the end of the day, there is actually no policy on her website. And that's what's scary to me.
So you think, Fabian, that when she releases her policy, that these people will sway a different way and will say, you know what, I actually support Trump?
I think what's going to happen is Trump just had his first counterpunch to Kamala's coming out party. They've spent hundreds of millions already on her first week or two being the nominee, the unelected nominee. But I think that the more people learn about her and the more that news stories are able to come out, that the more they'll learn, and then we'll see a shift in these polls.
I definitely agree. And I think, like you said, the more time, I think that we'll actually see a better picture of what's actually happening here. I want to shift us to another interesting poll that I saw, and it was the net favorability in one of these battleground states, Pennsylvania. which I find to be interesting how Tim Walz has a plus 11 percentage favorability and JD Vance has a minus 11% favorability. And Trump is at -3, but Trump is coming actually to some of his historical highs when it comes to favorability in such swing states. You also have Kamala Harris polling at +2% when it comes down to favorability. So what's going on in these Pennsylvania minds, do you think, when it comes, or just in terms of the blue wall states, what's happening there? Why is Harris Walz ticket more popular or more favorable, essentially, in your opinion?
That's a great question. Spending a lot of time in Pennsylvania, I can tell you that the people that I meet, especially the men, wouldn't be too keen on a Kamala Harris run or on a Kamala Harris presidency. These are more blue collar, gruff people who really it's hard to dupe them, right? They're in blue collar jobs. They talk smack with the boys all day. You know, they give each other jabs, and these people to me don't seem like the kind of people who, number one, are answering their phones and conducting polls, and secondly, they don't seem like the type of people to me that are going to fall for this kind of obfuscation of who Kamala Harris really is. So I always think about who is actually at home answering their phones and saying, yes, I would like to give you a poll. Because to me, there's a certain kind of person that would go ahead and I wouldn't do that. Never in a million years, but because I'm busy. So could it be white liberal women they're going to be the deciding factor in some of these swing states? That could very well be the possibility.
You know what's interesting, though, is that for some reason there's such a favorability for Walz, who tends to be anti what a lot of Pennsylvanians think of. Fracking, for example, is one of those things. I don't know how Pennsylvanians feel about his initial policy. What Kamala Harris's initial policy in 2020 was, is that we need to ban all fracking, period. I don't know how that seems so popular in a state like Pennsylvania. But let's get into the topics of it, because I have one more alarming poll that I want to show everybody. I have a couple more alarming polls, but this one is really alarming because historically we know that Republicans, or Trump at least, has polled much higher when it comes down to who can handle the economy much better. So, and we know that for a while now, when they ask voters, what is important to you? Two main issues are important for them: the economy and illegal immigration. Well, Financial Times poll, and give me 1 second, we'll pull that up. The Financial Times poll found that, let's see, I'm in the wrong. The Financial Times poll found that Kamala Harris is now leading Trump by 1 point when it comes down to who can handle the economy better. So, Fabian, while I pull this up, what do you think about that?
Hey, I also think about how many ads these people in these swing states have been seeing in just the last 2 weeks. I mean, they've been flooded, absolutely flooded. If you're in one of these states, I bet you can't turn your TV on without seeing a Kamala Harris advertisement. And she's getting the benefit of having all this ad money spent, making her look like the person that they want her to look like, which is not actually her. But I think the more time that comes, the more interviews that come out after the first debate, the more people really start learning about her, they're going to potentially change their mind. Because again, if you've seen Trump for so long and you see this shiny new toy and it's everywhere and you can't walk anywhere without seeing it, you're going to say, well, that's pretty cool. But then you start playing with the toy and you start going inside and, and checking out what it can really do and find out, hey, this is really not what I saw on the TV. So buyer beware.
Here's the thing, though, is that when you look at this poll, they actually trust her even more than they trusted Biden, which I don't understand how these people can come to such a conclusion right now, because we've had 4 years of her administration. We had her policies when she wanted to run for president. And what is so different? She hasn't offered anything different, and she's not going to do anything different than Biden's done. So I don't understand really how these people are thinking, how these polls, how pollsters are able to make these polls in the first place right now. But still, it's kind of alarming to see a spike like that.
Well, I mean,
I want to ask you though, real quickly, what do you think? What can you attribute the spike to?
Well, she has the entire mainstream media. She has Google. She has all the search engines that are pushing for Kamala Harris. Imagine that. You have all of the mainstream media that is trashing Trump, trashing Elon, trashing everything, but making Kamala, putting her on the cover of Time magazine, and all these magazines, making it seem like she's she's such a uniter. She's such a change agent, just like they did with Obama. But then you realize that she won with she didn't win. She was nominated without getting anyone's vote. And this is the mainstream media compartmentalizing what you see when you Google things. We know that Google subdued the Trump assassination Google search result, so you couldn't even really find anything on that topic. And if you did, it was topics that the mainstream media wrote like, well, there really wasn't a bullet that hit him; it skimmed him, and a bunch of other to take a Joe Biden word malarkey. So I think she's benefiting from having this entire organization, this entire system of mainstream media protect her and create a bubble around her, so that regular people who don't understand that this is not real life are going to be inundated by her and believe what they see.
Yeah, well, a couple more polls, huh? And we'll get
Let's
out
do
of
it.
this. But again, I know you may not like these polls that you're seeing, but that's good because hopefully that will fire you up and make you go out there and tell all your friends and family to vote for Trump, and maybe even actually, we'll talk about that in a second. But new Nevada poll sees Harris with the biggest lead over Trump yet, and this is actually historical highs for Democrats, what she's polling at right now in Nevada. A new poll of likely Nevada voters found Vice President Kamala Harris with a nearly 6 percentage point lead over former President Trump, the largest lead for a Democrat in any presidential poll of Nevadans since cycle. Now, I want to follow this up with another poll from Arizona. A new Arizona poll that was conducted after July 30 primary shows Vice President the July 30 primary. I didn't catch that. Okay. Vice President Kamala Harris leading former President Trump by 2.8%. And in the U.S. Senate race, Congressman Ruben Gallego is leading Kari Lake by 11%. So listen, okay, we've already talked about Trump and Kamala enough. What is happening down ballots? Why is Kari Lake so unpopular? What is going on in Arizona? She didn't win the governorship the first time. The Republicans still elected her in the primary to run for the Senate, and it's the same exact statewide race. I don't understand what they're trying to do over there in Arizona, and it seems like Kari Lake is very unfavorable in Arizona. Fabian, what do you think?
That is a great question. I've met Kari Lake several times. Well-to-do person. I'm not an Arizonan, so I don't live Arizona politics. But I actually don't know what Kari Lake's problem is. It could be, and I'm just speaking off the cuff here. I have no idea if this is actually accurate. But what I felt when I met her was that I was meeting an entertainer almost, rather than someone who's really kind of speaking to me. That's the feeling that I got when I met her. Not to say she's not a great person. She's in campaign mode. I get it. You got to be stump speeching and telling people, hitting points. But what I like to see is what Elon and Trump did yesterday, where we had a real conversation and they actually talk about the issues. Maybe that's something the Arizonans are feeling, where because she ran before and if she's running again, maybe they're like, okay, what's different this time? And if there's nothing different enough, you're going to say, who's this other guy or who's this other person?
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll do something about it there. But yeah, there you have it, guys. That's our Battleground swing update for you guys this week. We'll be updating you guys next week as well with any new polls that come out of it. But right now, Trump is trailing behind in the most important swing states. And down ballot, Republicans aren't doing too well when it comes down to the Senate and down to the House. We'll get into more of those polls next week. And Fabian, what do you think? Can we take a short break?
Let's take a little commercial break.
Folks, back for a little cool comparison segment between the two VP candidates. We'll be right
So J.D. Vance is the nominee for vice president for the Republican Party, and Tim Walz is the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. And there's been a lot of comparisons between the two since they did serve in the military, although the way that they ended their careers are very, very different. Tim Walz is a person who is the governor of Minnesota, and he enacted very draconian laws during COVID. And he has a very infamous nickname, which David made a video on called Tampon Tim, which apparently he's incredibly furious with that nickname. J.D. Vance is obviously a conservative, married to an Indian woman. Kamala Harris also happens to be Indian whenever she likes or whenever she decides she's Indian. But there's some stark similarities, stark differences between the two candidates. And I think it's really important to highlight that for people making a decision in November to say, okay, who's going to be second in line to be the president? Because it is an incredibly important position, although Kamala Harris was, according to many sources, the least popular vice president in the history of America. So we're going to take a look at some differences and compare them so that you, the viewer, can have a better knowledge as to who these people are.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to compare it. And what do you think? Where should we start with Tim Walz or should we start with JD Vance?
Let's start with Tim Walz, actually.
Okay, so tell me, so guys, the way we make this segment is that I got the JD Vance clips and stuff like that, and Fabian got the Tim Walz stuff. So don't think that Fabian over here supports Tim Walz. He's the one that just had to do that annoying research about him. Maybe without even going to any clips, first of all, one thing that really bothers me about Tim Walz is his stance on this whole alphabet soup community, right? And specifically when it comes down to kids. You're over 18, do what the hell you want to do. But why go as far as saying that this is a sanctuary state for kids to run away from families, communities, whatever it is, in states that may not be on the same ideological drive as them, meaning that they don't subscribe to this gender affirming care, which is really outrageous on its own. Jordan Peterson, I think, actually done a great job of explaining why saying that is the same thing as saying biological women. Like, you don't need to say that because it's saying two things in a row, right? So this gender affirming care doesn't actually exist. But anyways, I think it's just outrageous that you can have a candidate be so popular that holds such unpopular opinions. And you'll say, David, what do you mean? What do you mean unpopular opinions? 66% of Democrats agree that you need to leave these kids alone. So I just don't understand all of this stuff. But Fabian.
Yeah, so Tim, if Tim Walz is your stereotypical, I call him a sleeper cell, and that may be a very large term or a very overarching term, but here's Tim Walz in a nutshell. When he was in university, he went to China, and then he proceeded to keep going back to China over 30 times, from what I've researched. During his honeymoon, he spent it in China. The day that he got married, was the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. And you may know this picture. There's an old picture in China in 1989 where there was a gentleman sitting in front of a tank, or standing in front of the tank, and the tank could not pass in Tiananmen Square. There was a crackdown of Chinese citizens, and this picture went viral. It's one of the most historical pictures ever. Tim Walz had his wedding on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, if you could believe that. And when asked, why did you pick this date? And he said, I wanted to pick a date I wouldn't forget. Okay. Tim Walz began to take people to China. He would fund students to go to China. It's a very, very weird history that he has. And on top of that, he's taken some of those Chinese characteristics of the CCP and said things like, you're not afforded the First Amendment when it comes to misinformation and disinformation. So he's already placing limits on the freedom of speech. He's done things like put tampons in little boys' bathrooms, fourth graders, I believe it was, in schools. And that's supposed to be caring for boys to have tampons in a fourth grader, not even a teenager, a fourth grader to have tampons in the bathroom. I mean, I just saw a video today where he instructed the Minnesota police to walk down suburban neighborhoods. And if you were out during the COVID times past curfew, they would shoot you with paintballs. There's a video where residents are sitting on their porch and the police are walking down as a group of policemen saying, get in your house, but people didn't get in. They started shooting them with paintballs. Just think about what that does. Think about what that is. That is communist style policing coming to America, and it's already been done in his state. He said he doesn't believe in the complete, absolute freedom of speech, so he's going against our Constitution. And the Harris administration, just to even knock one even more, I don't know if you remember, but they wanted to put essentially what's people dubbed a Ministry of Truth, in the Orwellian terms, a group funded by the government that works for the president that's able to go out and seek out disinformation and misinformation, and then charge people or do whatever they want to do. That was subdued. There was a lot of public outcry, and they canned that idea, but they canned that department. But the ideas have filtered throughout the government, or this administration's government. So a lot of very scary things about him, and he's just a weird guy. And he has stolen valor. So he said he went to battle. He actually never went to war. He said that he was a high school football coach, which he was not. He was an assistant coach. But there's just a lot of stuff coming out about him that I think the more voters see about him, the more voters aren't going to like about him. And that's what I'm expecting.
Well, Fabian, I couldn't agree more with you, honestly. There's a lot of nasty stuff surrounding Tim Walz, and I think you just outlined that beautifully. When we criticize this whole thing with the Army, we're not saying that somehow his years of service was bad. It's just the fact that what he's doing post that service, trying to use, uplift it and manipulate his service in the benefit of some kind of political gain, that is nasty. So I think he did a good job of outlining, how his policies are terrible, what his ideology proves, and how unpopular.
The guy's a communist. I'm going to come out and say that. The guy's a straight up communist.
There's no way around it. But okay, so what I want to do is actually start with a little bit of policy initiatives that we have from J.D. Vance, because although he may seem like a traditional Republican, there are things that he disagrees with traditional Republicans about. And we can kind of see that with these newer Republicans that are coming into office and understanding, like, if we're going to be the pro-family party, then we also need to support actual families, right? So when we talk about families and how we can provide a relief to families in terms of like families that are actually having kids and whatnot, it doesn't mean creating new tax brackets for these individuals. It's seen through a form of child tax credit, meaning that if you have kids, the government will, give you an extra $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 per kid. Maybe not give it to you, but also show it to you in a form of tax relief, right? Which is a great idea.
Great idea.
So J.D. Vance Sunday went on all the various morning shows, MSNBC, I don't know actually, but ABC, NBC, all these various fantastic groups. So we can actually cue in this video of him talking about what his administration, Trump and his administration would do when it comes down to child tax credit, I think is fantastic. Let's roll this video.
You've been talking about the concern about the low birth rate in the United States of America,
Yep.
which is well documented. You said people without children should pay higher tax rates than those who have children, and the U.S. should look at lowering income tax rates on women who have multiple children, and you pointed to Hungary as a model for that. How do you plan to implement that policy?
Well, it's called the child tax credit, and we should expand the child tax credit. If you think about what the child tax
you and
credit
the Biden
does,
administration agree on the child care tax credit?
well, we think it should be bigger. I think President Trump and I believe in expanded child tax credit, but we also importantly want to actually get this thing done. The child tax credit has languished thanks to the Biden administration because Harris has failed to show fundamental leadership. Chuck Schumer's been unable to get it through the United States Senate, and we want to have a more pro-family policy. Now,
There was just a vote on this, you know that.
Well,
and you weren't there.
But Margaret,
It was a messaging bill. I'll give you that.
it was a show vote,
I'm with you on that.
and if
but-
I had been there, it would have failed.
So
and I
tell me
was
specifically what you want to do to expand the child care tax credit, because it's like $2,000 per kid right now.
Well, I think one of the things you can do is make it bigger per child. I think we'd love to see it at a higher dollar value. And
Do you
again,
have
President
a
Trump and
number
I
in mind?
have proposed that. I mean, look, I'd love to see a child tax credit that's $5,000 per child, but you of course have to work with Congress to see how possible and viable that is. We've also proposed
That's
legislation,
fantastic.
Margaret,
So,
to
right there is actually bipartisanship showing you from J.D. Vance and
So
all
this,
the high public approval when it comes down to something like this, right? The public loves these when you give them some program like this, and it's very pro-family as well. So whenever they try to attack him as a childless cat lady or whatever it is, it's not that. It's just that he understands that to thrive in America as a society, one of the most important things to do is to continue to reproduce.
That's
one of the most important.
That's the
things,
ball
right?
game.
And
If you don't reproduce, that's it.
that's it, right? And if we're going to be the party of the family, then we're going to have to embrace such subsidies by the federal government, or it can come just in the form of not having to collect taxes or giving tax relief just based on the kids, right? Let's move on to another thing that I really like about J.D. Vance. Unlike Tim Walz, which both come from, I guess, the Midwestern or whatever, they're supposed to both understand the blue color. But you tell me who actually understands them. Tim Walz, who says that you need to protect your kids from states who may not give them gender affirming care, or is it J.D. Vance that understand the drug pandemic that is caused by open borders and a weak policy on China? Blue collar communities, these hardworking Americans, are some of the biggest communities to suffer from fentanyl. Fentanyl makes its way through the southern border by the drug cartel smuggling it. But they don't manufacture it. You know who manufactures it? It's China. So I'd love for us to, first of all, J.D. Vance is the only one that actually talks about this. Trump talks about this. Few Republicans talk about it. The Democrats never acknowledge this issue. They never talk about it. You guys know why they never talk about it? Because these low-income communities, these blue-colored regions, also get hooked on pharmaceutical drugs, and they are the company of Big Pharma. They are the ones that take the most money from Big Pharma. So Republicans have a very solid talking point here, and it's not just a talking point; it's real. So if we can pull up the next video, which it's him talking about this issue, we can go ahead and
Do
play.
you view China as a competitor or an adversary?
I think they're both, right? And I think that what we want to do here is build the kind of international order where we can check China. We don't want to go to war with China, but certainly they're an adversary. I mean, they know, for example, the Chinese know that they're manufacturing tons of fentanyl. They're letting come into our country. Kamala Harris has done nothing about this. She should apply diplomatic and economic leverage over the Chinese to stop manufacturing this fentanyl, which then comes into the Mexican drug cartels, which
The
they
United
then
States
ship
has-
into our country.
The United States has designated
this is
some
a
of these groups
this is a
and pressed the
scandal.
Chinese government.
Oh, we could do so much more. Fentanyl
Sure.
is not easy to manufacture, Margaret. And if Harris was applying proper leverage to the Chinese and to the Mexican drug cartels, we would not have so many people
Like
dying
what?
of fentanyl
How do you
overdoses.
do that? What's your vision of how do
Well, I
you do
think
that?
you walk into to Beijing, you talk to Xi Jinping, and you say your entire economy is going to collapse unless you get access to American markets. You need to take this fentanyl seriously, or we are going to impose serious tariffs and economic penalties for not following our laws and not helping us stem the flow of this deadly poison.
Beautiful. Simple as that. Like I said, Democrats refuse to talk about this, to acknowledge this issue from happening. J.D. Vance, Trump, some Republicans, they acknowledge this issue. They talk about this issue. It's actually a big platform from them of why they also are so pro shutting down what's happening at the southern border, which leads me to the third last thing that I want to bring up when it comes down to the comparison segment here is J.D. Vance's approach to illegal immigration. And not just illegal immigration in terms of illegal crossings, the actual crisis that we say happens at the southern border, but what happens when they're already in the United States, Fabian? I think that's a key point as well.
Absolutely.
It's not just securing the primary issue, but then also addressing the secondary issue. And unfortunately, Democrats refuse to talk about the primary issue. So I like that J.D. Vance break this into two, acknowledging that we have a problem at the southern border when it comes down to actual deterrence factor, and then what to do about individuals who are already in the United States, because there's almost 30 million of them. That's almost 11% of our
That's a lot.
population. That's very a lot. So why don't we play this? We're going to start this at 13:30 and just play it till about 14:35, about a minute or so.
Have to do is to stop the bleeding, stop the open border, get Kamala Harris out of there, and actually re-implement the Remain in Mexico policy, rebuild or finish Donald Trump's border wall. And you do that and you stop the bleeding. Now, you're right. Once you do that, once you stop Kamala Harris's open border policies, you've got to do something with the people who are already here. And I think that you take a sequential approach to it. You are going to have to deport some people. If you're not willing to deport a lot of people, you're not willing to have a border when there are 20 million illegal aliens in our
But
country.
10 to 15 million people, this is like, I mean,
Well, John, I think it's the wrong attitude to take of it. Okay,
so you go knock on doors and ask people for that
well,
paper.
again, but I
do.
let me. I think this is the wrong attitude towards it. Right? There's 20 million people here illegally. You start with what's achievable. You do that, and then you go on to what's achievable from there. I think that if you deport a lot of violent criminals, and frankly, if you make it harder to hire illegal labor, which undercuts the wages of American workers, I think you go a lot of the way to solving the illegal immigration problem. But look, President Trump is absolutely right. You cannot have a border unless you're willing to deport some people. I think it's interesting that people focus on, well, how do you deport 18 million people? Let's start with 1 million. That's where Kamala Harris has failed, and then we can go from there.
And
Perfect.
finally,
There you go. Simple as that. I don't think, Fabian, Americans have a much more clear difference between these two candidates, these two administrations, what they offer and what they will plan to offer.
Yeah, Kamala Harris just yesterday, I believe it was, or 2 days ago, said in an interview that she was, or in a speech, whatever you want to call it, I don't know what she does. She goes there and she laughs and then she leaves. But she said that she would close all detention centers on day one, meaning instead of taking people and deporting them out of the country, they're going to close down the detention centers where they're at and allow them freely on the streets of America, in your neighborhoods, in everyone's neighborhoods. So there couldn't be, you're right, there couldn't be such a stark contrast between what these two parties believe. One believes that in infiltrating the country with immigrants to create a new voter set, because we know Black Americans are more and more turning conservative, and that's their biggest fear because that's how they win. So what's next? So we see these stark contrasts between one says, let's get the illegals out of America, and the other one saying, let's just close down detention centers and let all the illegals on the streets. Like, think of the idiocy in that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think you said it best there. Well, there you guys have it for the segment of the VP comparisons. Again, you can make your own opinion from here, but I think everybody knows who's the better candidate or who's the better administration to run our country, who has the better ideas, who's more pro-family, more friendly to the economy, more harsher on illegal immigration and crime. And I mean, we just can keep going and going here, but don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back after another short commercial break, and we're going to highlight all the great stuff that we learned yesterday from the Trump interview with Elon Musk.
Blah, 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 blah. What are you talking about? Here, have some freedom to go. Now, the Constitution is awesome. That's what it is.
Well, last night was fun. Huh?
Oh, it was absolutely incredible.
That was a really good time.
That was a 3-hour stream. We did that 3-hour stream.
Wow, 3 hours. And if you missed that, if you missed the interview or anything like that, you can go catch that on Breakaway, my channel, Fabian's channel, Twitter, anywhere. You'll find the entire stream 30 minutes before. Well, technically, we're on time, but there were so many people that were trying to log in and try to connect that it crashed the servers. Actually, it didn't crash the servers. What I'm talking about, there was a DDoS attack. Right?
Yes, there was.
And explain to people like myself that don't really understand, what does that mean?
So a DDoS attack is essentially where you overrun the server with traffic, so the server cannot handle it. So basically, you can send, there's many ways to do it, but one of the most popular ways is you send a lot of fake traffic to a website, so much so that the servers cannot handle it. Now, Elon Musk did say that they had tested it with 7.5 million people on at the same time, and it was working fine. They did have a DDoS attack. They started about a little over a half hour late. And Elon Musk said that they're going to limit the amount of people in the chat so that it didn't get, so the servers wouldn't crash anymore. And it let about 1.2 million, that was about the average number the entire way through, but 1.2 million people got to be inside of this. And then the rest are now seeing it online. And one of the curious things, and something that we talked about, is just yesterday before the interview, the European Union Commissioner sent a letter to Elon Musk, a very strongly worded letter, essentially saying, we have certain laws in Europe, and if we believe that you are violating these laws or these hate speech laws, what we consider to be hate speech laws, that watch your back, essentially. So Elon Musk replied with, he replied with a Tropic Thunder Tom Cruise meme that was very interesting. Yeah. And on top of that, it ran well. You know, one thing that I did want, I want to play this clip because Austin, who was our guest, Austin Adams, he had something to say about the UK government being so scared of allowing Elon Musk to actually have a normal conversation with another human being without government intervening. And this is what he said.
They didn't want their citizens to hear. And I don't think it was any specific individual thing. You know what I think it is? I think that they didn't want to hear that Trump was a reasonable and likable person beyond the narratives that were being painted about him through the media. I think that's the biggest thing, 100%, that they wanted to stifle, is the fact that he's a likable, reasonable individual with good policies, and he can sit there and just have a general conversation, just like you were sitting at the bar with him having a beer. They do not want their public to hear that the narratives that they have been working so hard, funneling millions and millions and billions of dollars into, portraying him as this loose cannon, this unreasonable person who could press the big red button at any given time. They don't want you to know. They don't want you to know that the person that's behind that is actually a reasonable individual with reasonable policies. He's likable, and all of the things that they have been saying about him for so long are false. That right there is exactly what they did not want to expose their citizens.
That's interesting. What do you think about David?
Well, they said it perfectly, right? And we actually discussed that exact same idea after the interview because I told you guys that this is the first interviewer that actually asked Trump about the assassination attempt in such detail that it felt like he was actually genuinely curious about it. And he humanized Trump, which is something so important to do, right? Especially like a couple of weeks ago when he went, we saw him on YouTube go golfing with Bryson DeChambeau.
Yep.
Things like that are so important, and that's what they are scared of, is seeing a different version of Trump than what the media has painted him as congressional Democrats try to paint him as a scary, inhumane individual. No, that's Fabian, you actually pointed this out to me a few times. It's like when you saw Trump sit down at the RNC, you don't really see Trump sit down much. And that was such an important and smart tactic and put him around his grandkids and whatnot because it showed that he can relax. He can be exactly like you, the average American who's enjoying their time, wants America to be better, and has concerns and has just a different political idea of how to achieve that. But that doesn't mean that he's this terrible human. And that's what they're scared of the most. Austin said it perfectly, that the European Union is just, this is what happens with hate speech laws. They can use whatever excuse they want to ban anything that they're scared of, as long as it's guys under hate speech. So Austin said it perfectly, Fabian, in my opinion.
And the interesting thing is, and I was speaking to you about this morning, is it's actually pretty comical, the fact that the government is the biggest professional and proponent and doer of misinformation and disinformation.
True.
Yet they're trying to make it so that we don't pass what they consider misinformation or disinformation. So they are creating a false reality and saying this is a true reality. And if you don't agree with it, you're going to get in trouble. Think about that. How Orwellian, and this term Orwellian keeps being used over and over again because we're living in 1984 right now. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, if you're not on X and you're just reading Google, you're reading the Washington Post, New York Times, you're not going to see anything negative about Kamala Harris, and you're not going to see anything positive about Donald Trump.
Very true.
If you are not on the mainstream media's carousel, you're going to see everything about everybody. And that's why these voters that we're talking about in the battleground polls, they just don't know. They probably, and I'm assuming a lot of them aren't on X researching what's really happening. They're just being spoon-fed imagery and commercials from the mainstream media and news articles. And she's on the cover of Time. Like, Time used to be such an important thing. I used to look up the Time magazine, and now I'm like, what the hell is this trash, right? But if you never get red pilled, then you're going to keep believing, and they're getting better at creating a reality for you to exist in and believe in. It's like a metaverse, and that's what's scary.
It is. I overall think he did a fantastic job yesterday, though. I think that he was very sharp when it comes down to his intent, when it comes down to policy. He was friendly. He was funny. He was his usual self, but in a more humanized level, which Elon Musk was able to actually implement that. And that is exactly what they're scared of the most. So, Fabian, I actually want to cue this up because a lot of the chatter afterwards was, well, Kamala, is not going to get invited. That's not fair. It's just a one-sided thing. Look at that. He already invited her. Said he'll happily host her. Now, I'll remove that so we can have a good conversation about that. And we talked about this yesterday with Austin as well. Trump just sat down with Elon Musk for almost 3 hours, right? 2.5 hours, something like that. That's almost a Joe Rogan episode. We know that he can sit down and talk with Joe Rogan. Do you actually think Kamala Harris could talk with anybody? You can give her the most friendliest individual to her. Will she actually be able to have a 2-hour conversation with them? That's kind of like what Trump did yesterday.
Well, I think that she could talk for 3 hours. Now, I don't think she could say things for 3 hours, but she could definitely talk. And we know she's good at talking without saying anything because being unburdened by what has been. And did you fall out of a coconut tree? And if you don't know these terms, these are all Kamala Harris terms, like the cloud, the AI is in your computer. And then if you want to put things in a cloud, you don't have to go file them downstairs. These are all actually things that she has said. So yes, she can say things for 3 hours, but they won't have any meaning. So I would be, you know what, if she does a Twitter Spaces, we need to have a game where we play where every time she says something nonsensical, we take a shot. I think 10 minutes in, we'd be dead drunk.
Be absolutely on the floor here.
Yeah.
I would not be able to pull anything up on my computer at that point.
You know, so something people were talking about is during the Elon Musk, Donald Trump discussion, the Harris Waltz campaign sent out an email to all of their donors, and I got it in real time because I'm on the email list, of course, because you got to do some opposition research. But this email that she sent was actually really interesting, and I know she didn't send it, but her campaign did. And here's how petty this is. Think about how childish and petty this is. Right now, Elon Musk is interviewing Donald Trump live on Twitter. We are not calling it X. Like, what? For what reason? Right? For what reason? Why can't you call it what it is?
It's a jab at Elon they hate Elon.
They hate him. It's not enough that Musk has pledged to donate millions of dollars to help re-elect Trump. He's using his purchased platform, one of the largest social media sites in the world, to spread Trump's unhinged and hateful agenda to millions of users. And down below it says Musk already ruined Twitter by allowing hate speech and disinformation to flood the platform. Now, here's something I want you to understand. There is no such thing, no matter how bad the mainstream media wants to actually convince you, there is no such thing as hate speech. It does not exist in the Constitution. There is no such thing as hate speech. There is speech that you don't like, but there is no such thing, and I want to keep repeating that. There is no such thing as hate speech as defined in the Constitution. They are trying to convince you that there is some new thing called hate speech and that we have to subjugate it and make sure that no one can do it. Hate speech is subjective. It just means something that you don't like. And if we can have discussions with people that disagree with us, then as Benjamin Franklin said, then we truly don't have freedom. And in a second, I want to read a quote from Benjamin Franklin because the guy was so far ahead of his time. And I'll bring that up so we can read it together because it's so perfect for the time that we're living in right now.
Yeah. Before you go to that, I just want to bring this email back on here because look at the most important thing, that if you chip her $25 for just for $25, she'll fix all of that stuff. Don't worry.
That's it.
Go donate $25 to her and she'll fix all your problems.
And if you don't, and then ActBlue will donate on your behalf under your name.
Exactly. They will. And if you don't believe us, that's a conspiracy. We're glad they expose it to you guys, unless you want to do your own research there. But what did I want to say about that? Oh, yeah. So I find it funny how much Elon Musk has become an enemy to the left, to Democrats, to progressives. Did you guys forget about Tesla? Isn't that like your biggest initiative? We talk to these idiots on TikTok all the time. If I had to say, about 50% of them come on and say that the biggest problem that they have is the environment. It's climate change. Well, these idiots suddenly hate Elon Musk and his initiatives with the batteries, even though Fabian and I both understand that that's not actually environmentally friendly, but that's a discussion for a different time. How hypocritical of them. This always solidifies the fact for me that they are sheep. Whatever is going around the community, whatever talking points, narratives, ideas, that is what they're going to believe in. And yesterday is another just example of that what Elon Musk can't host Trump on his platform to talk to the population about policies and ideas and whatnot in a presidential election year. You can literally go do the same thing, Kamala, if you can. And if you don't want Elon to be the one that interviews you or hosts your conversation, that's fine. Figure out who you want it to be, and he will platform your conversation on his yeah,
it's just any logical thinking person would be like, why are so many mainstream media corporations, news articles, or newspapers and media companies, why are they so mad Elon Musk spoke to Donald Trump? Like, why are they so mad that a discussion was had about what is wrong with the world? It's actually insane to think about that they are mad that two adults, one being the richest person in the world, one being the presidential nominee for a major American political party, they're mad that they're having a discussion. And you should really think critically about that. and because they want to remove the freedom of speech. And I want to quote Benjamin Franklin. I love quoting good old Benny. He says, "In those wretched countries where a man cannot call his tongue his own, he can scarce call anything else his own. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech." I want to read that again. This is incredible. Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freedom of speech. Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech, which is a right of every man. In here, it doesn't seem like he left space for hate speech or anything else, right? And this is one of the founders of the country. So, you know, reading stuff like that really tells me that this is not the first time freedom of speech has been under attack, but in my opinion, it's the largest attack that we've had because of the tools that the anti-freedom of speech people have at their disposal.
Yeah, and one of those tools is America being the only country that actually safeguards you against abuse. So, but any day, any moment, whatever Democrat that's in power can pass any sort of legislation to try and guide to more certain speech under this umbrella of hate speech. That's always the most dangerous thing, because then they can say whatever that they believe that is dangerous to them, dangerous meaning exposing their agenda, exposing their narrative, can be fit under this umbrella of hate speech, and they will censor you. They may even put you in jail for a few years, whatever it is, in order to make sure that your speech doesn't make it out there to the masses of the people. So I think we have to end on Benjamin Franklin right there. Right?
There's no better place to end it than there.
There. So guys, first of all, later on today, we're going to be interviewing a very interesting individual that has to file, or well, I don't know how to even say this, but it's going to expose the mother of all Twitter files. We're going to get a little sneak peek into that. This guy has worked extensively with a lot of individuals that are close to Trump, especially post the 2020 election. So we'll be asking him various things like that. We might stream that live on Twitter, right? So yeah, guys, catch us on live on Twitter. You got to follow the Breakaway USA account to see that. And nonetheless, make sure you share, like, subscribe, share this show with all your friends. This is an awesome new news show, and we deliver opinions, perspectives that are a little bit more unique. So come on here, join us, listen to us, and thank you for joining us as always. Breakaway USA is out.